Hello and welcome to an exciting tutorial where I am going to help you learn how to put 3D elements into real video. This will be the very first and basic steps. I'll be taking lots of shortcuts. I'll be helping you to do this as easy as possible. We'll be using two programs. These will be After Effects from Adobe and Maya 2015 from Autodesk. And I will be making it very simple. First of all, we're going to need a video to composite our 3D elements onto. And I have a bit of a shaky one here. I filmed off my floor earlier. You can see I even placed a little bit of a white piece of paper as for a tracking mark to be sure I had something to track if there was any problems. You don't have to do this, but it helps if you just want to be sure like I did. First of all, we're going to need to make this video into a sequence of images. That is, each image on its own and not a video file running at some frames per second. To do this, I'm going to use After Effects. You can use anything you like that you know can do this, but since we're going to use After Effects later, I feel like that would be a good choice, because I suppose you will have that installed. So you just drag and drop your file in here into the project window. You wait a little bit, and it does its thing, it imports it, and here's our video. Now, I don't know about yours, but my mobile phone is a bit weird, so it doesn't really understand frame rate very good. So I think it's running at, what was 28 point something frames per second. Yours probably won't do that. But I'd just like to right click it, go into interpret footage, click main, and then write 25. This isn't very important now as we're going to render images, but you should use this later on. It's very important that you pick a frame rate that you are going to use throughout your project. Things can easily change between the programs. It's just important that you pick one and you make sure that all the programs stick with it. So I chose 25. You just drag your video file into this non-composition here, and it's gonna make a composition the length of the video. Very easy, right? Now, I also recommend you trimming down the video a bit, because the rendering steps will take quite a while. So if you have a too long of a clip, it really will take forever for you to finish. It could at least, especially with some nice render settings. I am just going to grab a few seconds. You can drag this top fat bar here. It's going to trim the clip, or the composition actually in this case. Let's see, from 150 frames to 250 frames. Like 4 seconds and 25 frames per second. That'll be fine. You can right click it, the fat bar there, and say trim comp to work area. And here we are. We have a video. Good. We need to export it as this image sequence. And you do that by having this composition selected, as it's called. You hit composition up here and you say add to render queue. Now we have the render queue open. You click where it says lossless so we can select something else. Under format, you can pick PNG sequence. That's what I recommend. There's also other sequences. I recommend PNG. And then we need to output it somewhere. This image sequence. Gonna make a new folder. Tutorial. Very good. I'm just gonna make one that's called raw sequence. Right. Maya really prefers if there's a period before the frame number. What does that mean? The frame number will be these 3 hashtags inside the square bracket. So that means that before the square bracket, we're going to need a full stop, a period. Then you can call this whatever. This is just a little tip. I noticed I had some problems, so well, just take my word for it. It'll be a little easier. And this was our raw sequence. Save. Then you hit render over here and you sit back and relax and wait for it to render. And we're done. Excellent. Right, time to get on with it and get into Maya. I have it open here. Right. This is Maya. I hope you're at least somewhat familiar with it. Alt and left click will rotate around, and Alt and middle click will transform around. What would you call it? Translate. There we are. I hope you're all right. If you click space, you can see we have a side view down here, a front and a top view. It should be all right. The first thing we need to do is to create a camera. We can do this in some different ways. I think when you start up Maya, it might look like this or like this. What we need to do is go into rendering here and hit this one. It's called create camera. Creates a camera on the grid. And there she is. We can move it and do things with it as we can with everything else in Maya, especially by using the shortcuts WER. Those are the wonderful shortcuts of translate up here, move tool I suppose they call it. We have, so I can do like this, and I can do this, and then we have the E, that's for rotating. And then we have the R tool for scaling. Let's leave that for now. This is the 3 buttons over here. Now, what we need to do is we need to match our camera with our sequence, with our movie. We want to put our objects inside. Now, I chose a video where the camera was sort of stationary, it didn't move too much. And by moving, I mean it didn't sort of move around the object or anything, because that will require some extra knowledge and some extra programs, but that's for the next tutorial. This one, we use this stationary camera, so we need to make the camera inside of Maya look somewhat and do somewhat like the camera did in the video, and the camera in the real video mostly just stood still. We will take care of the shake later in compositing. So we need to put an image plane for the camera so that when we look through the camera, we have the video as a background. And I hit space here for the 4 views. I suggest you take the lower left view, or any view really, where if you select the camera here, and you might not even have to select it, if you go up into view and hit cycle through cameras, you'll start viewing through camera 1 as the first one, and that's perfect, that's what we want. And you'll notice if I move it around here, sort of you can see what it sees in the lower left. This will be handy later. Right, we need to make an image plane for this that holds the video, so we can have the video as the background. We won't be rendering it with the video as a background. Now, we won't be rendering it with the video as a background, not yet at least, but we will need it for reference. So if you hit this button here, is the 4th button called image plane. It will enable the image plane and ask you what should we put on it. And we should put the sequence that we just made. I'll get right to it as soon as I move in here. And here it is. You just select the first image to begin with. Here we are. You can see here in the perspective view, we have this image plane here, and you can see it's the background of our camera. It's a few more settings. If you hit the camera here, and you select the camera and go into the attribute editor, you can also right click the camera and say camera 1, I believe. Yeah, that worked okay. Now, up here it says camera shape 1. Right next to it, we have image plane shape 1. We need to go into that, and then we need to click the little checkbox that says use image sequence here. And let's see if it works. You can see the plane here. It's easy to see up here, I think. The plane updates with our video. Our video is, however, only like, what is it, 100 frames long or something? We might have to trim that. In fact, I'll trim it right now. You can do this a few ways. I'll just go into down here, animation preferences. I'll select the last frame to end at 102 and the animation as well, 102. While we're in here, where it says playback speed, keeping the same frame rate was nice, so I'm gonna select other and write 25. This is frames per second, I believe. Yes, 25 frames per second. Thank you, Maya. Right, we needed to line up the camera with our shot. And here we have our shot. So, as you can see, there's a ground plane in Maya. That's the grid here. We need the grid to line up sort of all right with our ground inside the camera. So I'm going to rotate it a little bit and move it about. It was a little bit above the ground, of course, and it filmed downwards. It's hard to say how much, really. Eyeballing this should be fine for the first lesson, so to speak, the first tutorial here. Precision comes in second row, really. Let's see, how does this look? I can see, I think I might have angled my camera a little bit too much. Let's have some of it back like so. Might even be a little much. Not sure though. Maybe this will do. I think this is all right. Should be okay. Yeah, I'm going to stick with that. Very good. Perfect. So now we need an object, right? We need an object. We need to composite a 3D object in. That's the point of the tutorial. I'm sure you have a nice idea for an object, and I totally think you should go with that. I'm just going to use a placeholder, a weird little object. In fact, I think I'll go into polygons and which one should we have? Should we have a cylinder? I suppose a cylinder is fair enough. Just gonna make it in the middle. You can make it and do whatever you want. Let's see. I don't know. I don't even know why I made a cylinder really. Here we are. We've made a cylinder. We've committed. Right now it's this little levitating cylinder. I suppose that's fun. Maybe the cylinder is a magical cylinder, sort of like levitating for reasons that we shouldn't go into. Maybe, in fact, I think maybe the cylinder might even be animated. I trust you might know how to do this, but I'm just gonna do it the quick fire way under animation here. Gonna hit this one here. Just gonna set a key in our animation, our timeline here. And then I'm going to go to the end of my timeline, and then I'm going to hit the key again, and I'm going to rotate my can here. Let's see, does it rotate? Oh, it rotated even more than I thought it would. Well, I suppose that's nice too. Oh, the angles. Yeah, that's what happens. And you know what? It doesn't really matter. It's quite a rotation it's got going on. In fact, I think I might dial it down a little bit. Nothing rotates this much. It's fucking... We have a levitating can. It's already a bit far out, isn't it? Stop rotating. You rotate too much. Here we are. New key. Only rotate a little bit, you crazy ass can. Oh well. Doesn't know what a little bit is. Ah, the angles again. Alright. So I have an animation now anyway. Our can is doing something. Alright, the can wants to rotate. I'll give it rotation. And on this axis too. Rotating can. Excellent. I think we should also just give it a quick color. I'm sure you have your own model that you're using. Let's just give it a fung, shall we? A fung material. Have it. Give it a color. What color is cans? Green. A little less saturated. Remember, never pick the completely saturated colors. Nothing is actually these colors in real life. And we're going to make it look as if our object is actually real. So something like this. Green can has been born. And it even animates. Very, very good. Now, we need to have the lighting inside the scene match the lighting in our video recording. So you need to take note of where the lights are when you record. And it's time for us to try and recreate the lighting on our cube. So, let's view it from the top. Here's our camera. Oh, couldn't select it. Here it is. And further up here is the can of green. Now I know that behind my camera there's a window. And I'm just going to use the most simple light there is. That's the point light. I feel it's the simplest. That's the third one here, the point light. I'm gonna create it and it's gonna end up on the grid and I'm gonna move it out behind my camera. I also know that the window was above my camera, so over here. It's hard to say actually. I'm gonna say it's there. Also, it was a bit overcast and anyway, the light from the window is a bit blue, as you can even see here on the carpet, I feel. So blue it is. Let's see, how blue was it though? This blue? Maybe more blue. And it was brighter. I'm gonna go with two intensity. I also had a couple of ceiling lights. I'm gonna need to make those as well. So I'm just going to select my light here. Oh, and I accidentally moved it. I'm going to Control D, that's duplicate. Put a light over here because that's about where it was, I think. And I also had a light over here. I also duplicated there. Actually, these were more of warm color and they weren't as bright. Oh, and I forgot. Okay, need to do it here as well. So warm, sort of warm, and 1. Thank you. We could actually have a render now, and we should set some of the rendering settings. So up here, we have render settings, render settings, and I suggest mental ray for this. It's much better and looks much nicer, and it also casts our shadows correctly, which we will need in a moment. Again, I think we should use some PNGs. I like those. Those are great for sequences. And we also need to change our frame and animation and our name, really. We needed someone like the one from After Effects we just made. So name, period, frame number, period, extension. And extension is like PNG. PNG is an extension. Start frame number 1. And what was it? 102 for the end frame, I think. And we need to render through camera 1. And we need to render in a higher resolution. I don't even remember what resolution we had our video in, but I recommend that you don't render massive resolutions unless you know what you're doing. Just gonna make a 720 of this. In fact, let's just check. What is our video in here? Our video was, there you go, 1280 times 720. So that's what I'm going to use in Maya as well. Excellent. So I select down here, the window down here with the camera, because that means this is the one we're going to test render. And we sit back, and we wait a little bit, and here's our cube. Looks marvelous. A little bit too green even. We can change that in compositing even. Right, we're going to need some shadows. Shadows are important to convey realism. And this cylinder, the green can, would cast shadows on the floor in real life. And to simulate a floor, I'm going to make a plane, a standard primitive plane here. Going to drag it out, and size isn't important as long as it's big. Let's see if it casts shadows now. The light sources should automatically do this. And it does! Perfect! It also reveals, however, that reflections are enabled. This is Mental Ray helping us with reflections, because reflections are nice, but they are more complicated, and I'm sorry, but they won't be part of this tutorial. Maybe the next one. So anyway, we need to disable the reflections. So I'm just gonna click my cube here, go under Fong, that's where we had the color. And here we have reflectivity. I'm gonna turn that down to nothing, 0. All right. Let's see what else. Let's see if it worked first of all. Are you reflecting the ground plane? No, it is not. That is good. You can see the different shadows from the different things here. Very good, everything looks nice. It might be time for us to make our render layers. So right now it's also time to make any last minute changes. Not last minute, but any last changes. I think those were a little closer. We can also preview some of the lighting in any of the windows by, in the respective window, clicking this button here, use all lights, and this button here, which is called shadows. That doesn't do too much. In this case, it would do more if we had more enabled. Anyway, that looks nice. We can also enable it here. Let's see. You can see the yellow lights here casting some yellow stuff, and you can see the blue light here casting the blue stuff. All right, so now we need to do a few very specific things to make it render out correctly. I hope you'll follow me. It's a bit interesting, but it will make for better results, and we like better results. First of all, we need to go into the channels box, the layer editor, over here. Then we need to go under render. And now we need to make some render layers, they're called. Layers that are going to be rendered out when we hit the batch render button. This, we're going to select everything. I'm going to select everything now. Did we get everything with? I think we did. The image plane, I suppose. We can have that one as well. So that's everything. And from that, I'm going to click this button over here. Create new layer and assign selected objects. We have layer 1 and I'm going to hit it again. And we have layer 2. I am also going to rename them. I'm going to call the first one Beauty, because this is going to be a beauty render with as much as possible. And the second one I will call Shadows. This will only render the shadows on the plane. So that's the purpose of that. Now, there's a few, and there's quite a few different settings here. First of all, we don't want the image plane to be rendered. So if we can always go back to the master layer here and we can click image plane and it should go away. Then we can test the beauty layer. Just have a quick render and see if there's any errors. Seems fine. Very good. Now here comes the interesting settings. For the beauty layer, we don't want to render the plane. We only want to render our object. And now, while the beauty layer is selected, I'm going to click the plane, and inside the attribute editor for the plane under render stats in the plane shape, I'm going to uncheck primary visibility. I'm going to do sort of the reverse, but not quite, for shadows. I'm going to select the object and only the object and go into attribute editor and disable the primary visibility here so that the shadow layer only renders the plane. I hope you got that. Beauty layer, we disable the primary visibility on the plane and only the plane. And in the shadows layer, we disable the primary visibility on the object and only the object. Now we need to do a few extra settings to these layers. The shadows need to be rendered out with well, everything looks fine, but it needs to be rendered out with the right camera, and we're just double checking everything is okay. These are probably going to change now because you need to right click shadows and go into attributes here. We're going to select the preset called shadow. There's a preset button there and we select shadow. I believe this does change a few things that we wanted to change, but we also wanted to render using Mental Ray, and you can see here it changed to Maya software. Mental Ray, please. Now we're going to have to call it something, and something different, something else than the beauty layer. And we do this by right clicking and saying create layer override. I'm going to call this shadows. This means that only this layer will be called shadows. The other layers won't. Everything looks fine, yeah? Good. Camera 1, good. And then we have our beauty. You can see I click the render settings button for each layer. Our beauty layer is going to be called beauty. That should be good. And it's using Mental Ray. Very good. Everything looks to be in order. You can see there's a little check box here, little box. This tells us what renders and what doesn't. You can see there's a cross over the master layer. That won't be rendered, but the beauty layer will, and the shadows layer will. So, that's good. We can test the shadows layer, because that one was a bit special, right? By hitting shadows over here, making a test render. And if it comes out black, that's good. Because we are rendering shadows, we can click this button up here to see the alpha level. And you can see this is how our shadows are. The black is transparent and the white isn't. You can see we actually are rendering shadows. Now, if this were a more advanced production, we would have a lot more render layers with specular and reflections and wonderful things. But we're keeping it simple. This is the first and most basic little test. There's only one thing left that I think I've forgotten. I've forgotten to select where to render to. There's always something you forget, right? Always something. You do that under render settings. And you can see that, all right, we're inside the shadows layer right here, but luckily we can hit edit and say change project image directory. Here we are going to tell it where to render the images to. We are also going to be rendering sequences again here. And you just click the little folder and you make some folders, and okay, it suggests a weird place. I don't know. I don't like weird places in here. And what was it? I called it tutorial. And then we have Maya renders. I'm gonna select that. And you can see where it says images, it's now rendering to tutorial Maya renders. That's what I like. And now we are ready for rendering. We're going to use the batch renderer, which will be selecting and rendering these two because they have the check mark, beauty and shadows. So up here where it says polygons probably, we select rendering. Then there's a rendering tab now where we can select the little square here along with batch render, a little square next to it, and we can actually hit the button batch render if we are satisfied with everything, and I am. So you hit batch render and you grab a Snickers or something, because this is gonna take a little while. But see you on the other side. Forgot to mention that you can see how far it's come by looking in this little, in the text down here. You can see we're at beauty frame number 10 now, and how many percent it is. After it's done with the beauties, it's going to make the shadow PNGs. And here we are. We have rendered our little animation and our little cylinder. Let's have a look at the files. We have 102 rendered images of our spinning cylinder, and we have 102 images of our shadows on the plane here. That looks almost like a logo. Excellent. Time for compositing. And we are going to do this in After Effects. And here we are. Right. Here comes the frame rate again. We're going to import by right-clicking, import and file. And then we will navigate to the folder. I think that's the wrong one. Here. Tutorial, please. Here we are. Maya renders. And we also have our sequence. The first thing we will import is our sequence. This one, the real video. When you select the first one, it's automatically going to assume that it is a sequence, a PNG sequence, because this will automatically be ticked. If not, do tick it. Here we are. We are going to right click it again and say interpret footage. Go to main. And here where it says assume this frame rate, I'm going to select 25. It doesn't have a frame rate yet because it's just a lot of pictures. I'm going to import our renders as well. Here is our beauty render, automatically a sequence. I'm going to tell it to be 25 frames per second. And I will do the same with the shadows. Do 25. Right. Now we can take all three of them and throw them down here. Still duration. No we can't. Now we can take all three. Oh well, actually we should take one at a time and put them down here. So we have our sequence right here. Then we have our shadows on top of our sequence. And then we have our model on top of our shadows and on top of the sequence. And I did that wrong. Here we are. Excellent. Now we're going to have to track it and match it to the shot a little better. Because we aren't. we really aren't. We're going to do that by using the built-in tracking in After Effects. This is the tracker down here. You get it by going into Window. And in here we have the tracker down here. Just select that. Okay, I'm deselected it. It's going to appear down here. If you select our raw sequence, which we need to do, and you click track motion, you will enter inside the raw sequence and you'll get a track point. This is good because we need to track something, especially something close to our model's location. And as you noticed, I had this this white piece of paper just laid out to be sure. The outer circle is where it's going to search for what's inside the inner square. So that wasn't quite right. The outer square, it's not a circle. The outer square is where it's going to look for what's inside the little square. So I'm just going to have a look at the sequence, and it is sort of close to our piece of paper. So this should work all right. It needs to be, you need to track something close to the location of the object. You might also be able to track a piece here on the carpet. It might work completely fine, or it might give some errors. I know this works okay. So when you've selected that, you can change the size of what it's going to look for here. It's usually a nice idea to include the entire object, but it looks for the contrast. It likes the contrasts. I'm gonna hit the little arrow here, and it's going to track forwards. This might take a while. I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to wait. And here we are. Excellent. It's tracked. You can see the path it's following here if you zoom way in. A bit hard to see, but there's a path. Little path going down the middle. Excellent. So now we need to create a null object. What's that, you say? You right click here into the composition, you say new, and you say null object. We can go back to the composition up here. We're inside the clip. And this is basically just an object that isn't being rendered. Nothing particularly fancy. Now we need to apply our tracked things to this object. We need to apply our tracked path here. I've clicked up here. This tracked path needs to be applied to our null object. And we do that by going into Edit Target, selecting our null object. As long as it has the right motion source and all this. When we have the null selected here, where it says motion target null 1, we hit apply. It comes with a little dialog, and you say yes, it's going to apply the dimensions. And now our null object will follow the little tracked path. And what we can do now is that we can parent or pick whip our beauty model layer here to the null, and our shadows to the null. And lo and behold, it follows our shaky camera a little bit. Excellent, we like that. If we rotate the camera too much, we can also track rotation. I'm not sure that's necessary right now, but if you down here, there's a few checkboxes. You can also hit the second one, which is rotation. And you're just going to have to select a second point, and it'll track and compare and implement the rotation between the two and apply it to your target. We use the null object. I don't think I need rotation for this one because it was simple. You don't even need this step if you've had your camera on a tripod standing perfectly still. That rarely happens, but if you do have a tripod and you did have your camera completely steady, you don't even have to do this step. Right. Now for the actual fitting in the integration of the compositing. First of all, you know what, this can, it's still way too green. It's not going to fly like that. I'm going to select it here, our model here, we called it beauty. I'm going to, first of all, it needs blur. It needs some, let's see how much, I don't know. I'm going to use the fast blur. This is easier for the computer to make, and I don't know how much I'm going to need. Can explode it, that's a bit much. 2 or 3. I'm going with 2, that's fine. And then I'm going to go and make some color correction. You can see there's an effect here under color correction. There's lots of effects under color correction. And I'm going to be using first the levels. These are the shadows, and these are the highlights. What's below this arrow will become black. This is a histogram of the brightness. And what is above this arrow will become white. So below this arrow, black. And below the other, white. And you can see if I change it, the object moves with it. In the middle here is the gamma. That's the midpoint. You can also move that. So let's see. First of all, I'm going to make it a little bit. Let's see, how do we do it? I'm just gonna change the gamma, I think. Can I make it a little bit brighter like that? I moved it a little further back. Usually it's at 1. You can see the value here. Use that one. I'm going to move it a little further back. That's going to brighten the object a little bit. I think this is fine. And now I'm going to add and change a little bit of color. If you're nice, you might be. You can go into synthetic aperture here and click SA Color Finesse. This is a compilation of color correction stuff. You can open the simplified interface here, or you can click a button and get a big, nice here, the full interface. You can get a big interface. Now, here we have a color wheel that affects and changes the color of everything. We have one that changes the color of just the, let's say, the less light part and the midtones and the very bright part of the image. I think the bright part of this image might need a little bit of turquoise. Yeah, it's hard to see even. It does change something, not a lot. Anyway, turquoise here, I think, and then the midtones, a little more blue. You can see, you can also change it a lot. But anyway, I think mine needs to be a little more blue. It's hard to say. This is a bit of a feeling. There isn't really any particular rules. You can also play with the curves if you're so inclined. That's a bit like what we did with the levels, but not quite. I think I'll leave it. We shouldn't make it too complicated either. It even became a little bright after I did this little bit of coloring. So I guess I'll revert some of this. It's starting to look somewhat believable, I feel. We also do, however, need to put a lot of blur on the shadows. So effects, blur and sharpen, the fast blur. And I think I'll actually just give this a whole lot of blur. I don't even know how much. 25, I don't know. Let's say 15. Well, that's up to you, however much you want. And this is starting to look all right, actually. Almost believable, wouldn't you say? If you're going to go the extra mile, you can even add grain. You know how there's a bit of noise in the image when you look at film and stuff filmed? Oh, and a little note. Oh, yeah, okay. First the grain. Effects. Color. Oh, sorry, it's not called color correction. It's called add. Well, noise and grain. And here we have add grain. You can see it's starting to make it there. I think this is too much, though. Yeah, that's too much grain. So I'm going to turn down the intensity. But this is bonus stuff. This isn't necessary, probably. And since we didn't have any ambient lights inside of Maya, the dark parts get... Oh, sorry, they get a little bit too dark. So we can change that to inside of layers here. We can, instead of having the blacks become black, we can have them become a little brighter by selecting the minimum value here. Go with here. It's a bit hard. Again, this is a feeling. Color correction and color grading and all this stuff is a bit of a feeling. The square here is because it's only making the grain inside the square. If you go to preview here and go final output, it'll go away. It's also a bit difficult for it to render. And again, we're just about done. We've been just about done for a little while. I'm just adding a few little hints and little things everywhere. One last thing you can do is you can apply a bit of forced motion blur, since we didn't add it in Maya. But this is total bonus stuff. If you're still watching, you can easily render it. But I'm just going to apply some motion blur, forced. It's actually fake motion blur. It's under here, under effect, and is it time? Yeah, time, CC forced motion blur. I want that. And one little note is that the grain should always be the last thing applied. So we need to put that on the bottom here. And the motion blur doesn't take effect here. The forced fake motion blur doesn't take effect unless we've clicked this button here. It's going to enable frame blending until we've checked the little box here. You can also click it twice to get a different one, but I like the first one. You see, it changes to a solid line. I think the first one will do, the other one is more advanced. Now we're definitely ready to render. I think the motion blur might not be visible at all. I think I didn't move the camera very much, did I? I don't think I did. We should render. So again, composition, add to render queue, select a format where it says lossless, you just click it. And I'm just gonna make a H264. You can make anything you like, maybe, no, you know what, I'm gonna make a QuickTime. And I don't even know what format, animation, that's okay. Okay, and it's going to render it right here, and it's going to be called result. And I will show you this, the result, right now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.